Part 88. After the flash marriage, the character collapsed. Author, Dalby in the World. Chapter 871. Chapter 871 Taking a love rival to visit a doctor too. No wonder his wife would fall in love with Kenny Bryce. If he were a woman, he might also choose to marry Kenny Bryce, who would make him richer. However, if we compare in appearance, his boss is better, but Kenny Bryce is more masculine. His boss is a handsome man with a devilish appearance, and his style is slightly different. This made him couldn't help but worry about boss. Maybe it would be very difficult to win back his wife this time. The smile on Secretary Zhang's face faded, and he sighed with annoyance and worry. He looked at Jianyuman with his melancholy eyes, showing a trace of annoyance, a trace of pity, and a trace of pain. Miss Jian, I'm here today to ask you a favor. I hope you can come with me to persuade Mr. Tang. Persuading Tang Yuj? Why? Jianyuman looked confused, and Secretary Zhang had a complicated expression on his face. How difficult is it? Secretary Zhang sighed again, with an expression that almost made his hair look white. Whenever he thought about not being able to invite Jianyuman to see boss, his year-end bonus would be deducted. Thinking of this, tears and sniffles almost came out. As long as he takes Jianyuman back, not only will he not be deducted, but the year-end bonus that was going to be deducted before will also not be deducted. Secretary Zhang looked at Jianyuman sadly and pretended to wipe away tears. Mr. Tang fell ill the day before yesterday. He has not recovered at all after being ill for 3 days. The doctor said that if he continues to have a high fever, his brain may be burned out. But Mr. Tang is not cooperative at all and refuses to give injections or take medicine, so he asked, I have a fever, and I only eat a little white porridge every day. I can't eat anything else. I have never seen Mr. Tang like this. I have no choice but to come to you. I want you to persuade him to take medicine and see a doctor, and don't do it to yourself. Body joke. Huh, Jianyuman opened her mouth for me, wondering if she had heard wrongly. Is he a child? He still refuses to get injections or take medicine. Jianyuman not only didn't feel distressed when she heard this, but the first thing that came to her mind was that Tang Yuj was pretending to be sick again. After all, he had learned from the past. But looking at Secretary Zhang's sad look, I suspected that he might really be sick. But I heard that he refused to take injections or take medicine. How old is he? He is almost 28 years old. Such a big man can still be so willful. So I know you are in London, so I asked you to go and see him. If this was City S, I would call Mrs. Tang to come. I believe Mr. Tang will definitely take medicine. Now I am in a foreign country, and I am the secretary. You can only do it in a hurry. At this moment, Kenny suddenly let out an uncontrollable laugh, then covered his mouth, looked at them apologetically, and looked away. He really couldn't help laughing. Jianyuman glanced at Kenny and then at Secretary Zhang. Thinking of Kenny's feelings for her and the scene of Tang Yuj's flowers blooming in the past few days, I felt angry. She would not be stupid enough to agree to see Tang Yuj in front of Kenny, which would make Kenny sad. Although I haven't decided to accept Kenny Appa's feelings yet, I don't want to do anything that will hurt her. Why are you looking for me? He and I have nothing to do now. It doesn't matter even if your brain is burned out and you become a fool, Jianyuman said ruthlessly, but was she really not worried in her heart? She actually wanted to see with her own eyes whether he was really sick. She even hoped that he was not sick. End of this chapter. After the flash marriage, the character collapsed. Author, Dalby in the World. Chapter 872. Chapter 872 Taking a love rival to visit a doctor 3. Jianyuman spoke ruthlessly, but was she really not worried in her heart? She actually wanted to see with her own eyes whether he was really sick. She even hoped that he was not sick. Let's go. I still want to continue eating. Secretary Zhang heard that Jian Yuman was unwilling to accompany him. Secretary Zhang's face turned dark. In his mind, he saw a bunch of RMB flying away, flying further and further away. His pitiful year-end bonus depended on this money for a year. Miss Jian, please go see Mr. Tang. I know this is your private matter, but seeing Mr. Tang like this and staying by his side for so many years, I really feel sorry for him and can't bear to let him ruin his body like this. Just ask, seeing his affection and devotion to you back then, you should go and see him. His year-end bonus. It seems to have begun to grow wings and fly. Jian Yuman hesitated for a few seconds, thinking that he was indeed very good to her back then, almost always responded to her requests, and they lived a happy marriage. Is it really okay for her to be so ruthless? What if he really gets sick? Just go and see Tang Yuj, I won't mind. Appa. I'm not going. Jian Yuman's face softened. She didn't expect Kenny to take the initiative to let her see Tang Yuj. Wouldn't he be jealous? Thinking of this, she decided not to see Tang Yuj. She and Tang Yuj have nothing to do with each other anymore. Even if they do have a relationship, they have a common son. This son Tang Yuj doesn't know exists yet. She has decided to completely cut off from the past and begin to accept Kenny Appa's feelings. She cannot let Tang Yuj disrupt her decision. Especially because her heart is not firm. She still has Tang Yuj in her heart. She is afraid that when she sees Tang Yuj, she will become soft-hearted and it will take more time to forget him. Jian Yuman never expected that 20 minutes later, she would still come to see Tang Yuj, and she was not the only one who came, even Kenny came with her. Originally, Jian Yuman decided not to come, but Secretary Zhang kept begging Jian Yuman and couldn't drive her away. Kenny also suggested that Jian Yuman go and have a look, and he also suggested that they come together to see if Tang Yuj was really sick, just as friends. When Secretary Zhang heard that Kenny was coming too, the expression on his face was very wonderful. It changed several expressions in 1 second, and then he began to mourn in his heart. Arriving at Tang Yuj's villa in London, a pair of hands hesitated to open the door. "Mrs. If you want to see sir, just come. Why bring the love rival of your boss with you? Who would take their current lover to see their ex-husband? Isn't this asking the boss to fight with his love rival despite being sick?" As long as Zhang Tianrui thinks of the scene of Mr. Tang meeting Kenny, several images of Tang Yuj's angry fight will change in his mind. Drunk. If it weren't for his year-end bonus, he would actually be quite happy to see this drama. Now everyone is following to the door, the storm is about to start, things are unavoidable, I can only mourn for boss in my heart. Boss. I hope you won't deduct my year-end bonus. After all, you just asked me to bring my wife, and you didn't say I couldn't bring anyone else. Zhang Tianrui slowly swiped his card to enter the villa, and slowly invited Jian Yuman to enter. Jian Yuman walked to the bedroom in a familiar manner. She had been here once before when Tang Yuj was pretending to be sick, so she knew where his bedroom was. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After the flash marriage, the character collapsed. Author, Daobi in the World. Chapter 873. Chapter 873, Fighting a Love Rival Despite Being Sick. 1. Jian Yuman walked to the bedroom in a familiar manner. She had been here once before when Tang Yuj was pretending to be sick, so she knew where his bedroom was. Kenny was holding a fruit basket in his hand and followed Jian Yuman closely. Tang Yuj, who was resting in the room, heard the sound of opening the door dimly, and immediately opened his eyes. His eyes were bright and full of energy, and he was not sleepy. Hearing a woman's voice, I immediately guessed that Secretary Zhang had successfully completed the task, and his depressed mood due to illness felt much better. He closed his eyes again and waited for Jianyuman's arrival. Jianyuman walked in and glanced at Tangyuj, seeing a strange blush on his face and a frown on his face. The situation looked more realistic than the last time he pretended to be sick. "Tangyuj, I'm here to see you," Jianyuman called in a low voice. Tangyuj slowly opened his eyes. Joy appeared in his eyes for a second. After seeing the man behind Jianyuman, it instantly turned into anger. He sat up from the bed and pointed angrily at the man standing behind Jianyuman. Why is he here? Sitting up too hard, a feeling of dizziness made him fall back onto the bed, holding his forehead in discomfort and panting slightly. Tangyuj was really sick this time, and as Secretary Zhang said, he never got better. However, Secretary Zhang was a bit exaggerated, saying that Tangyuj didn't take medicine or get injections. In fact, he took medicine and got injections, but he never got better. "Are you okay?" Jianyuman could tell at a glance that Tangyuj was really sick this time. She immediately went over and touched his head. The temperature on his head was indeed unusually high. Tangyuj intuitively reached out and waved Jianyuman's hand away, looking at the man behind Jianyuman with an unhappy expression. Kenny smiled lightly, held up the fruit basket in his hand and said with a smile, "Hello, my name is Kenny Bryce, excuse me for interrupting you. Xiaodao and I heard your secretary said you were sick, so we came over to see you." Kenny spoke generously, but the declaration of sovereignty was too obvious in his words, and even the look in his eyes was provocative. "Who asked you to come? I don't welcome you here." Tangyuj said this angrily, covering his dizzy head in discomfort. His body went limp and he lay back on the bed, groaning in discomfort. He was so angry that this woman Jianyuman actually brought her love rival to see him. "This was the first time I met Kenny Bryce. It turned out that when he was sick and weak, he couldn't even show his domineering demeanor because his body was too weak. He was so angry. Why did this woman Jianyuman bring Kenny Bryce?" He even called Jianer Xiaodao affectionately, showing off the close relationship between the two. Thinking of that night 2 days ago, when he saw Jianyuman and Kenny kissing and laughing on the side of the road, his heart throbbed violently. It was also because he saw that she had found her home again that he became so angry that he became seriously ill. That night, Jianyuman and Kenny were talking and laughing, and the harmonious scene was seen by Tangyuj. Tangyuj, who had been following them, looked from the angle he was standing at, and the two were kissing passionately on the street that night. This time he fell ill not because of a cold, but because he saw the scene that night. After he came back, he smashed almost all the decorations in the whole house, and he became seriously ill because of it. End of this chapter. After the flash marriage, the character collapsed. Author, Daobi in the World. Chapter 874. Chapter 874, Fighting a Love Rival Despite Being Sick Too. Because I couldn't let go of Jianyuman in my heart. I kept thinking about every little moment they had been together. I also thought about the scene I saw that night. I felt depressed. I couldn't let go. I couldn't let go. I couldn't let go. I was ill for 2 days. Neither is good. Unexpectedly, he asked Secretary Zhang to bring Jianyuman, but he also brought his love rival. Tangyuj's eyes were evil and he glared at the smiling Kenny. The more he looked at this smiling face, the more unhappy he became. His heart was filled with anger, and he felt dizzy again in anger. He fell back on the bed in less than 3 seconds. "Tangyuj, are you okay?" Jianyuman came over and asked with concern. It wasn't like she hadn't seen the way Tangyuj looked at Kenny, and how they were secretly competing with each other. "Tangyuj. Do you like to call him by his first name now? In the past, I would call him Mr. Tang, sugar baby, husband, etc., but when did I call him Tangyuj so unfamiliarly?" Thinking of this, Tangyuj felt even more uncomfortable. "Get out," Tangyuj said coldly, speaking ruthlessly and without any emotion. Qian Yuman's face darkened. She thought his situation was really bad and wanted to comfort them, but unexpectedly she actually made a sound and drove them away. Tanyuj, don't be ungrateful. If Secretary Zhang had been asking me to come see you, I wouldn't have wanted to come. Yes, Chairman Tang, Xiaodaobi and I came to see you out of kindness. After all, you are alone in London with no one to take care of you. It is indeed very pitiful. Kenny smiled kindly and said decent and caring words, but ying in Tanyuj's ears, it was a provocation. What does it mean to say that he is alone? Does it mean that there are two people coming to see him? Who is he, Tanyuj, who needs their pity? Tanyuj angrily tried to get up again, but he had no energy at all. Secretary Zhang, who had been watching in the corner, knew that the situation was out of control. If he didn't go out at this moment, his year-end bonus might not be deducted by a few %, but completely lost. He immediately ran over and helped Tanyuj up. Tanyuj sat up panting and pointed at Kenny angrily. I'm not telling you to get out, I'm telling Kenny Bryce to get out. Who are you? Do I know you well? Did I invite you to my house? After finally saying this, Tanyuj coughed violently, which made his head dizzy even more. He covered his head and groaned uncomfortably. It was really uncomfortable. Seeing Tanyuj's face turn a little pale, Qian Yuman's heart twitched and she glanced at Kenny Appa. Tanyuj, don't be ungrateful. Kenny Appa is kind enough to come see you and you actually chase people away. Do you have any gentlemanly manners? If you don't welcome us, we'll just leave. I'll leave this fruit for you to eat. Qian Yuman turning around, he took the fruit basket from Kenny and put it on his bedside table. Tanyuj's eyes were fixed on the fruit basket, almost making a hole in the fruit basket, and his chest was heaving violently. Damn it! She actually wanted to go with Kenny. She had to drive Kenny away and keep the stinky woman here. She actually dared to bring her love rival to the door to anger him, which made him want to spit out his blood. Chairman Tang, seeing that you are coughing so badly, why not cut a pear for him to eat? Don't get excited. We are just here to see you and we won't be here for a long time. There is no need to be so angry. Kenny smiled to smooth things over. No need. Tanyuj covered his head in discomfort and relied on Secretary Zhang's support to prevent him from falling back on the bed. End of this chapter. After the flash marriage, the character collapsed. Author, Daobi in the World. Chapter 875. Chapter 875, Fighting a Love Rival Despite Being Sick. 3. His purpose today is to ask Qian Yuman to accompany him, and he must not let Kenny ruin his plan. Not only did it not bring them closer, it actually made him angry and made him feel even more uncomfortable. He must stay calm now and cannot vent his anger blindly, otherwise it will only push Qian further away from him. Qian Yuman frowned, concerned about Tanyuj's current situation, and annoyed that Tanyuj didn't welcome Kenny's arrival. I didn't want to make it difficult for Kenny Appa to be a good person, and I was worried that Tanyuj would be physically unable to bear it if he continued. Tanyuj, you'd better have a good rest, I'll leave first. After much deliberation, Qian Yuman still chose to leave. When Tanyuj heard this, his heart ached violently, and his hands under the quilt clenched tightly into fists. His wise eyes glanced at Kenny, who was smiling at the corner of his eyes. This man was indeed here to demonstrate today, and he didn't really want to see him at all. Tanyuj rolled his eyes and made an angry, painful, and sad expression on his face. Okay. Okay. Now that I have a new love, just think that my ex-husband is dead. They say that one night of marriage will lead to 100 days of love. Now it seems that I am nothing in your eyes. I have loved you since I was a child. It's your fault when I was a child. You've been following me and calling me Brother Wang, now you, let's all go. He bit his tongue hard with his teeth, biting it open, and then made a painful expression. He covered his mouth with one hand, bulged his mouth and spit out the blood in his mouth, onto the snow-white blanket on the ground. The bright red blood on the snow-white blanket was so noticeable that it also stopped Jianyuman and the other two who were about to leave. When Secretary Zhang saw the dazzling bright red on the blanket, his face instantly turned pale and he shouted, "Boss, why are you vomiting blood?" Secretary Zhang's words made Jianyuman immediately turn around and see the bright red on the snow-white blanket. Jianyuman's eyes darkened and she immediately swooped over. "Mr. Tang, are you okay? Why are you vomiting blood? What's wrong with your body? Is it serious enough to vomit blood?" Tang Yu's face was pale at the moment, and the situation looked really bad. There was a trace of blood hanging from the corner of his mouth, reminding Jianyuman that he had just vomited blood. "Still, I'm not angry with you. Jianyuman frowned and took out a handkerchief to wipe the blood from the corner of his mouth. "Secretary Zhang, go and call the doctor to take a look." "Okay." Secretary Zhang didn't dare to delay. He didn't expect boss to vomit blood. However, when he left, he saw the joy in boss's eyes and immediately understood that this was Mr. Tang's plan to keep his wife. The pace of going to the doctor next door is also faster. Because Tang Yu's illness was quite serious this time, the doctor was asked to live in the room next door so that he could come over and check on Tang Yu's condition at any time. Tang Yu vomited blood, which frightened Jianyuman. She gently laid Tang Yu down, covered him with a quilt and asked softly, "How are you doing now? Are you feeling uncomfortable anywhere? Don't hold it in if you feel uncomfortable." Tang Yu opened his eyes and looked at Jianyuman with a somewhat distracted look. He stretched out his hand to hold her hand and put it on his chest. "It hurts here. It hurts. Especially when I saw you and Kenny together, it was so painful that I couldn't breathe." "Ah. There's a heart problem." Jianyuman was frightened when she heard this. If there was a heart problem, it could be a big or small matter, and it might have serious sequelae. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After the flash marriage, the character collapsed. Author, Daobi in the World. Chapter 876. Chapter 876, Fighting a Love Rival Despite Being Sick. 4. Tang Yu looked at Kenny, who was looking at him with concern, and felt unhappy. "Does this uncle need your concern? You leaving now is the best concern for me. Don't think that showing concern will make him forget that they are love rivals. Don't leave, stay with me, okay?" Tang Yu moaned and begged in a low voice, speaking in a pitiful and endearing tone. "Okay, I won't leave, I'll take care of you here." Jianyuman nodded repeatedly, understanding that he was vomiting blood, and she didn't dare to leave now. Tang Yu had a happy smile on his face and closed his eyes with satisfaction. "But I don't want to see this extra person in the room." Jianyuman was stunned, turned around and looked at Kenny, who was standing behind him, looking at Tang Yu with concern on his face, and frowned. At this moment, he realized that he was a little close to Tang Yu. He immediately retracted his hand, stood up and walked to Kenny Oba, very hesitant and uneasy. He was thinking about how to speak so as not to hurt Kenny Oba. "Little Daobi, just stay and take care of him. He is already sick. I can understand that you stay to take care of him because of past friendship. I won't be jealous." "Appa, thank you." Jianyuman looked at Kenny with a moved face. She didn't expect that he was so considerate and could see her anxiety. "It's okay, I'm leaving first." Kenny smiled and reached out to touch Jianyuman's head. The moment he turned to leave, his heart tugged. When leaving, he saw Tang Yu's provocative eyes. Was he declaring his victory? I see. Kenny had already guessed that Tang Yu deliberately staged the scene of vomiting blood, but what could he do? He is the patient, Xiao Daobi's ex-husband, and the person who is always in my heart now, Xiao Mickey's father. However, he will not just give up. Tanyuj, your victory is only temporary. Little Daobi's heart has begun to turn towards me. No one can say who will get her in the end. After Kenny left, Tanyuj was in a happy mood. He accepted a series of examinations from the doctor. In the end, the doctor thought that Tanyuj's condition had improved, but when he saw Tanyuj blinking at him, he already understood a little bit of what he meant. The doctor had a serious expression on his face, looked at Jian Yuman, and sighed. Mr. Tang's illness is a depression caused by excessive stress for many years. It has not improved in the past few days and he cannot withstand the ups and downs of his mood. If you make him angry again, he will vomit blood in a fit of anger. So you can't make him angry again. Everything must go according to him, otherwise the disease may continue for a long time, and the root of the disease may even be left. In fact, most of what the doctor said was made up. This doctor is also a human spirit. He understood it after a few glances from Tanyuj. As Tanyuj's personal doctor for a period of time, he naturally knew about the relationship between Jian Yuman and Tanyuj. Relationship, so Tanyuj's condition was exaggerated a bit. Jian Yuman was scared to death when she heard that Tanyuj's illness might have sequelae. Thinking about how I had made him angry just now, I was always annoyed that I didn't know how to spoil the patient. Now that Tanyuj was sick, it was inevitable that he would have a bad temper, and he couldn't help but want to argue with him. Okay, take good care of the patient. If anything happens, call me next door. Excuse me, Dr. Jian Yuman smiled and nodded, sitting on Tanyuj's bedside and looking at him. Seeking a monthly ticket, asking for recommended tickets, and hurry up, I will update it early. Nowadays, my concubines don't like to give me recommendation tickets or monthly passes. No matter how hard it is, cash will do. Crying blindly. End of this chapter. After the flash marriage, the character collapsed. Author, Daobi in the World. Chapter 877. Chapter 877 Sugar Baby's Master Level Coquettishness 1. Excuse me, Dr. Jian Yuman nodded with a smile, then sat on Tanyuj's bedside and looked at his expression, her brows still furrowed. How are you now? Jian Yuman's hand that was about to reach out stopped in mid-air, and she almost touched his face uncontrollably. After Kenny left, he was in a much better mood. As long as his love rival was not around and he wasn't angry, nothing would matter to her. I still feel so uncomfortable. I feel like there is something stuck in my heart, and I am so hungry. Tanyuj touched his belly pitifully and looked at Jian Yuman with a look in his eyes as sad as a puppy. Secretary Zhang, hurry up and buy some food for your boss. Jian Yuman pretended not to understand what Tanyuj meant, and called out to Comrade Zhang Tianrui, who had been watching silently. Comrade Zhang Tianrui had only moved a millimeter when he received a murderous look from his boss. He was immediately frightened and stopped, pretending that he was not in this room. Kenny Bryce came just now, and the boss looked at him with a look that was more terrifying than ever before. He could already think that his year-end bonus was running out. I think of him who has worked hard for a year without complaint. Seeing that the end of the year is only 2 months away, but just thinking about it makes me burst into tears. Secretary Zhang, why aren't you going yet? Jian Yuman reminded him again. Tanyuj, who was lying on the bed, made uncomfortable groans and spoke intermittently. Jian'er, you have changed. In the past, when I was injured and sick, you would cook preserved egg and lean meat porridge for me to drink. I don't want to eat outside. It's not delicious at all. I want you to cook it. After saying a long series of words, Tanyuj covered his head in discomfort and began to groan. He even coughed violently, almost coughing out several times. There are no ingredients. Jian Yuman came up with a somewhat pale excuse to resist a sick baby. I'm going to buy it now. Secretary Zhang, who had always chosen to be transparent, suddenly jumped out from the corner, raised his hands and walked out after speaking. When leaving, he told the doctor not to disturb them next door. Young couple. Tanyuj raised his unusually red face, grabbed the quilt, opened his mouth and bit a corner of the quilt, and started to moan again. Tanyuj stretched out a hand exaggeratedly and waved it randomly in the air. The corners of Qian Yuman's mouth twitched and she looked speechlessly at the coquettish and adorable sugar baby who pretended to be pitiful. A man who is obviously almost 30 years old, how can he pretend to be pitiful and cute? He is so powerful here that he even brought out the long-dead mother Tang, which instantly shattered her original intention to refuse, but she was still stubborn and unwilling to do anything. You are so grown up, yet you still act like a spoiled child. There is not much difference between the ones you buy from outside and the ones I make. The sugar baby just rolled around on the bed holding the quilt. His body was already very weak, but after being tortured like this by himself, he felt dizzy again. He was so uncomfortable that he could pinch a big fly with his brows. End of this chapter. After the flash marriage, the character collapsed. Author, Daobi in the World. Chapter 878. Chapter 878 Sugar Baby's Master Level Coquettishness 2. This time I was no longer pretending, I was really in unbearable pain. I let go of the quilt all over my body and lay in a big shape on the bed. My eyes became confused and my face became unusually pale. This look startled Qian Yuman, and she immediately stretched out her hand to touch his forehead. Her head was frighteningly hot, but her face was unusually white. Tanyuj, how are you? Are you okay? Wake up, don't scare me. Qian Yuman reached out and patted Tanyuj gently. Someone who used his last bit of strength to act coquettishly could no longer hold on, and his consciousness began to change and he fell into a coma. Even though Qian Yuman slapped his cheek, he couldn't open his eyes and continue acting coquettishly. Instead, he closed his eyes and fell asleep. At this time, Qian Yuman was completely panicked and immediately shouted wildly at the top of her voice. Doctor, doctor, come here quickly, Tanyuj has fainted. The doctor who was preparing to take a rest next door heard Qian Yuman's shout and immediately ran over quickly with his tools. Conducted a series of examinations on Tanyuj and determined that he had no major problems, but that the medicine he had just taken took effect and fell into a coma. Seeing that Qian Yuman was still worried, he took another antipyretic injection just in case and covered Tanyuj's forehead with a wet towel. Miss Qian, as Mr. Tang's personal doctor, I can't help but say a few words to you. Mr. Tang is very weak now. It's best not to make him angry and do everything according to him. He's feeling better now. The disease will be cured much faster, so you'd better follow what you say to him and don't mess with his body anymore. As for what he wants to eat and drink, just follow him. The doctor began to think casually and gave Qian Yuman instructions. Qian Yuman accepted the doctor's criticism obediently, knowing that she had not followed Tanyuj just now, which made his condition slightly worse. The doctor did not leave again. Before Secretary Zhang brought back the ingredients, Qian Yuman sat beside him and looked at the sleeping Tanyuj, with a lot of thoughts in his mind. When Secretary Zhang arrived, she followed the wishes of a sleeping sugar baby and went into the kitchen to make preserved egg and lean meat porridge for him. She also made 2 snacks suitable for patients. She was very attentive and devoted herself to the sick Tanyuj. She put aside all the distracting thoughts and concentrated on making delicious food for him. Tanyuj woke up when he smelled the familiar aroma. Almost as soon as Qian Yuman brought in the preserved egg and lean meat porridge, Tanyuj woke up. After sleeping for a few hours, Tanyuj's complexion was obviously much better. With the doctor's good care, his head was no longer dizzy as it was a few hours ago, and the high fever became just a slight fever. When he opened his eyes, he could see Jian Yuman appearing in front of him with preserved egg and lean meat porridge, which made him unable to recover for a while, thinking that the two of them were still in love 3 years ago. At that time, he could always smell the breakfast made by Jian Yuman when he opened his eyes. It was also his first wave of energy intake every day. A good breakfast could keep him energetic for the day. "Good morning, wife," Tangyuj smiled and greeted Jian Yuman enthusiastically. Jian Yuman came in with preserved egg and lean meat porridge. The hand holding the tray shook, and her heart was agitated by Tangyuj's doting greeting. Hearing him call her wife again, with such a strong feeling of doting, brought me back to 3 years ago in an instant. End of this chapter. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After the flash marriage, the character collapsed. Author, Daobi in the World. Chapter 879. Chapter 879 Sugar Baby's Master Level Coquettishness 3. At that time, Tangyuj always stayed in bed and refused to get up, so she would bring a rich breakfast to the room to seduce this lazy little pig to get up. When he opens his eyes, he will always say dotingly, "Honey, good morning." Many years later, I heard the exact same cry, but the relationship between the two has become a thing of the past and will never return. Tangyuj has not yet calmed down, his mind is running on the morning 3 years ago. He wants to sit up like in the past, put Jian Yuman in his arms and give her a good morning kiss. Hands on the bed, he tried to sit up. A sudden dizziness made him fall back onto the bed, and at the same time, he woke up from the chaos. Jian Yuman paused for a few seconds as he walked over, then put a bright smile on his face and joked in a relaxed tone. "Sir, Mr. Tang, are you confused? Have you forgotten that I am no longer your wife?" Jian Yuman bent over and placed the tray in her hand on the bedside table, her body still in a bowing position. Tangyuj, who was sitting on the bed, had eyes flashing, and a cunning light flashed in his evil eyes. Tangyuj reached out and suddenly pulled Jian Yuman. After a few hours of rest, his body recovered a little strength, and he pulled Jian Yuman into his arms with a little effort. Caught off guard, Jian Yuman was pulled into Tangyuj's arms, lying on top of him. "Wife, wife, wife," Tangyuj called wife 3 times in a row, holding Jian Yuman's waist tightly with both hands. "Hey, Tangyuj, don't eat me again." He had used this trick last time when he pretended to be sick, and he would do it again this time. "You are my wife, it's not about eating tofu, it's about the intimacy between husband and wife." Tangyuj held Jian Yuman's head with both hands, and kissed her red lips directly. The moment he kissed her, his tongue broke in, prying open Jian Yuman's teeth in a familiar way, and swept the honey in her mouth. Juice. Everything developed so fast that Jian Yuman had no time to react before she was forcefully kissed by Tangyuj. When she realized her current situation, she immediately opened her mouth and bit his tongue, stretched out her hand to push Tangyuj away, propped herself up and jumped far away quickly. Tangyuj, who was pushed away by Jian Yuman, had not fully recovered his strength. He was pushed hard by her, and his body that was slightly propped up fell back on the bed. He made a muffled sound in his mouth, and his brows that had finally relaxed were wrinkled again. "Stand up." Jian Yuman covered her mouth and looked at Tangyuj angrily. "What are you doing?" Tangyuj was knocked unconscious by Jian Yuman's push, wailing uncomfortably, closing his eyes tightly, covering his head with one hand and groaning. He is really uncomfortable. He is still suffering from a fever. How can he withstand Jian Yuman's torture? Finding that something was wrong with Tangyuj, Jian Yuman immediately approached him again, with a guilty look in his eyes and a look of self-blame on his face, and asked with concern, "Tangyuj, are you okay?" Tangyuj slowly opened his eyes, smiled weakly at Jian Yuman, and explained his behavior just now. "Sorry, I just woke up and didn't regain my consciousness for a while. I thought we were still husband and wife. Qian Yuman's expression still blamed herself, but a trace of disappointment flashed in her eyes. Just now she heard Tang Yuj call her wife, with a doting tone, which made her little heart beat for a while. When she heard Tang Yuj's explanation, she felt disappointed. She asked how could he still call his wife when he was sober, and even say good morning to her in the middle of the night. End of this chapter. After the flash marriage, the character collapsed. Author, Daobi in the World. Chapter 880. Chapter 880 Sugar Baby Master Level Coquettishness 4. Just now she heard Tang Yuj call her wife, with a doting tone, which made her little heart beat for a while. When she heard Tang Yuj's explanation, she felt disappointed. She asked how could he still call his wife when he was sober, and even say good morning to her in the middle of the night. The disappointment in Qian Yuman's heart made her feel annoyed, and the expression on her face immediately changed to anger, and she gave Tang Yuj a lesson. Mr. Tang, don't do this next time. You don't know that exchanging saliva between people can spread tens of millions of bacteria. Especially if you are sick now, it is easy to transmit your disease to me. She wiped her mouth with disgust. In fact, it was not disgust at all. It was just to cover up the disappointment in her heart. Tang Yuj chuckled. Instead of feeling sad, he felt happy. Looking at Qian Yuman's annoyed look, his mood became better. At least now I can still chat and laugh with her as before. Qian Yuman stood up, pointed to the food on the bedside table, and said indifferently. The preserved egg and lean meat porridge you asked for has been prepared, along with 2 snacks. You're welcome. I have been adhering to the spirit of learning since I was a child, and I have always done good deeds selflessly. Tang Yuj smiled slightly and looked at the preserved egg and lean meat porridge on the bedside table. He was awakened by its smell just now. Looking at the steaming preserved egg and lean meat porridge, his heart felt warm. Do you need me to help you sit up and use the preserved egg and lean meat porridge made by this lady? Qian Yuman crossed her arms and said in a cold and arrogant tone. Tang Yuj laughed again and nodded. Need. Qian Yuman raised her eyebrows, moved over to hug Tang Yuj's body, pulled him up, and put a pillow on his back. Being held tightly in Qian Yuman's arms, he almost couldn't control his hand floating in the air and hugged her waist again, but finally let it go and let her control it. Qian Yuman sat on the edge of the bed, picked up the preserved egg and lean meat porridge from the tray, and handed it to Tang Yuj. Eat. Tang Yuj glanced at the preserved egg and lean meat porridge, then raised his hand exaggeratedly and pretended to be weak. He lowered his hand halfway up and frowned helplessly at Qian Yuman and shrugged. I don't have any strength in my hands. Qian Yuman twitched the corner of her mouth and glanced at Tang Yuj, who looked slightly better. When she touched his skin just now, she felt that his body temperature was still too high. Considering that he was a patient now, it was normal that he had no energy to eat. I'm going to ask Secretary Zhang to come over and feed you porridge. Qian Yuman tried to stand up, but saw the corners of Tang Yuj's mouth drooping. You are so cruel. You abuse my classmate Xiao Zhang casually. Look at what time it is. He has been helping me with my work during the day these past few days. He also has to run around to take care of my health. He can finally rest for a while at night, but you get him out of bed, Tang Yuj said sadly, his tone clearly accusing Qian Yuman of being inhumane. Qian Yuman glanced at the time. It was already 12 o'clock in the morning. Normal people had gone to bed. Secretary Zhang did look tired, so she went out to buy ingredients and went to the guest room to rest. Even Tang Yuj's personal doctor, who had taken care of him for 24 hours, couldn't bear it anymore and went to rest. Tang Yuj's serious illness caused death to everyone around him. She was still in high spirits and did not feel very tired. After thinking about it, she decided to give up calling Secretary Zhang out to take care of Tang Yuj. End of this chapter.